Hey everyone, welcome back to Harvest Stories, where we cover the world of Harvest Moon and Story of Seasons speedrunning. In today's video, I want to talk about a new event that the HMSR community is doing, what we're calling Game of the Season. Basically, we want to encourage people to play some of the games that historically haven't gotten as much attention, both to fill up some of the emptier leaderboards on speedrun.com, as well as just to celebrate a fresh side of the series. And for fall 2023, we've chosen Harvest Moon Tree of Tranquility as our inaugural Game of the Season. Game of the Season is intended as a community event centered on collaborating to deepen our knowledge and improve the available resources on the game in question, not just for the speedrunning community, but also for the many casual fans out there who just can't seem to trigger that last pesky hard event. Luckily, in the modern era, we have tools that allow us to more precisely investigate the mechanics hidden within our favorite farm sims. So today, we'll be talking about the ins and outs of TOT speedrunning, including the story, basic mechanics, and the categories we'll be focusing on this season. I hope this will inspire some of our runners to give the game a try, and maybe even inspire some of our casual members to get in on the fun as well. Released in 2007, Tree of Tranquility features a bit more of a story-driven focus, although the story is pretty typical Harvest Moon fare. The protagonist arrives on an island and discovers that the harvest goddess has disappeared after the death of the mother tree. To save the goddess, the player must revive 5 rainbows, which serve as bridges connecting new parts of the island, and eventually plant a seedling to become the new mother tree. Each rainbow is created by collecting ingredients for a recipe that is requested by the corresponding harvest sprite. These harvest sprites can be summoned by watering the colored flower beneath each of 5 trees located around the island. The recipes call for a wide array of goods, such as fish, crops, dishes, or animal products, and collecting these ingredients quickly is the main hurdle in any speedrun. Now, for the purposes of Game of the Season, the community is going to be focusing on 2 main categories: marriage and rescue harvest goddess. Marriage is pretty self-explanatory, while rescue harvest goddess requires the player to complete the 5 rainbows and plant a new seedling to complete the main story. Basically, the equivalent of any percent. Of course, I can't provide comprehensive routes for every single category in this video, but I would like to look at the basic mechanics of Tree of Tranquility, review the category requirements, and give at least some initial ideas for possible strats or routes for the community to build off of through the coming weeks. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to make note of the version history of the game. The Japanese version was, of course, the first to be released, and it features some glitches that make speedruns significantly easier, including item duplication. This version has been run in the past by one of our Japanese runners, and he was able to rescue the Harvest Goddess somewhere in the ballpark of 4 hours. But for the purposes of this video, I'll be looking strictly at the English version, specifically the US version. Without these glitches, rescuing the Harvest Goddess may take somewhere between 6 and 8 hours, which may seem daunting, but I think the game has quite a lot of interesting routing potential to offer, and I know our runners will be doing their best to bring this time down as low as possible. As for the US version, there were 2 main releases. The first can be identified by the green color of the disc, while the second features full color artwork. The green disc is noteworthy for having a glitch which causes one of Calvin's heart events to crash the game, meaning that he cannot be married in that version. As far as we know, that's the only difference, so if you have the green disc, you won't be able to do Calvin marriage, but you should be able to do every other marriage category, as well as rescue Harvest Goddess. With all that out of the way, let's look at marriage in TOT. In total, there are 8 bachelors and 8 bachelorettes to choose from, and they run the gamut in terms of difficulty. Looking at the affection system, each villager's affection is a value on a scale from 0 to 1,000. In the menu, this is represented by hearts, with each heart counting for 100 affection points, for a total of 10 hearts. Villagers and marriage candidates don't always start at 0 affection. In fact, each villager has a certain amount of base affection. For example, Anissa always starts with 99, while Candace starts with 10. This is a crucial little aspect that must be accounted for in marriage runs, but it also plays a big role in rescuing the Harvest Goddess. But we'll get into that later. All villagers get +5 affection for their daily conversation. As for gifts, TOT is unique in that it actually does allow for multiple gifts per day, unlike many other HM games, and every villager can get up to plus 10 affection from gifts each day. This could be from a single high affection gift, or it could be from multiple low affection gifts. The marriage process itself is actually quite straightforward. Every marriage candidate has required heart events at 200, 400, 500, and 600 affection. The events at 200 and 500 are morning farm cutscenes, where the candidate appears and presents a gift. Accepting the gift gives plus 10 for the first event and plus 50 for the second event. The events at 400 and 600 are both date events. By talking to the candidate in the morning on a non-rainy day before 11 a.m., they will offer the invitation. Accepting gives plus 10. The first date is at the beach for the bachelorettes, and the Sunday Inn for the bachelors, but the second date is always under Alan's tree near Brownie Ranch. Both dates have to be triggered between noon and 12:50 p.m., and giving the correct dialogue during the dates gives plus 50 each time. When a candidate reaches 800 affection, the mayor will appear at the farm in the morning to talk about the blue feather, and 1 week later, another morning farm cutscene will trigger where the player sees a blue bird, at which point, going to Carmel Falls will trigger the final cutscene where the blue feather is obtained. All these heart events are more or less identical for all candidates. They're required for marriage, but luckily, they're all very simple and easy to trigger. Now, where candidates differ, and where some difficulty comes into play, is with one last heart event, and that is each candidate's request. For most candidates, the request event triggers at 500 affection, usually after the second farm gift, where the candidate will ask the player for something, usually a specific item. In most cases, accepting the request gives plus 10 affection, and completing it gives another 50. Candidates will not accept the blue feather unless this request is completed. I won't look at the requests in detail, but we'll be working to put together comprehensive resources throughout the season, which I'll add to the description at a later date. All told, these heart events make for a total of 240 free affection for the candidate. And once they've all been successfully triggered and the candidate is at 800 affection, the proposal will be accepted. During the proposal cutscene, the mayor will ask when you would like the wedding, sooner or later. Once the date is set, you can freely sleep until that date and the wedding will trigger automatically. Now, naturally, some candidates aren't available from the start of the game. Many require the completion of at least one of the rainbows. We'll get to the specifics in a bit, but for now, let it suffice to say that for the candidates that must be unlocked, any marriage speedrun will want to complete Darren's rainbow as quickly as possible, Darren being the green sprite under the tree in the town square. The sooner it's completed, the sooner that candidate will move in and courtship can commence. Now to clarify, just because the rainbow is completed doesn't mean the candidate will suddenly move in. There's actually a certain order and timing that new villagers arrive. For example, Candace and Luna are always the first to move in after the first rainbow, followed by Calvin, Chase, and Phoebe in that order, and they arrive only on the 1st and 15th of each season. So if Darren's rainbow is completed by the end of spring, Candace and Luna will arrive together on summer 1, Calvin on summer 15, Chase on fall 1, Phoebe on fall 15, and so on. Lastly, it appears that 2 of the candidates, Renee and Selena, don't require the rainbow in order to move in, but the rainbow is necessary to complete their request events, so Darren's rainbow will still have to be completed for their marriage runs. With all that said, we'll find out more about the rainbow requirements as we get into the next category, Rescue Harvest Goddess. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this category is significantly faster using the glitched Japanese-only route, but since most of our runners will likely only have an English copy, I'll be looking at rescuing the Harvest Goddess in a glitchless context. Just to recap, the category requires the 5 rainbows to be completed and the seedling to be planted and grown into the new mother tree. The 5 rainbows are commonly referred to according to their respective sprites. Darren, the green sprite, Ben, the blue sprite, Colin, the yellow sprite, Alan, the red sprite, and Edge, the purple sprite. The player actually has access to 3 of these sprites pretty early in the game. Darren in the town square, Ben in Maple Lake District, and Alan near Brownie Ranch. However, some of the ingredients for certain rainbows are inaccessible until another rainbow has been completed, usually because that rainbow gives access to the area where the ingredient can be obtained. For example, even though Alan is available very early, the woodfish, which is required for his rainbow, can only be caught in the Goddess Pond on Mount Gelato, which is unlocked by Ben's rainbow. Each of the sprites also gives a little badge upon the completion of their rainbow, which, for the purposes of the story, is what allows the player to use the rainbow as a bridge. This is really only relevant in the case of Ben's rainbow, as he discovers he's lost his badge, which means his rainbow can't be used right away. Instead, the player must complete Colin's rainbow, which itself requires Darren's rainbow, in order to recover the badge and use Ben's rainbow to access Mount Gelato. Now, this might all sound complicated, but for all intents and purposes, it means that the rainbows must be completed as follows. Darren's and Ben's rainbows can technically be completed in any order, although Darren's is usually completed first, as the ingredients are quite easy to obtain. After Darren and Ben, Colin's rainbow should be completed, which gives access to East Gull Island, where Ben's badge can be recovered. This gives access to Mount Gelato, where the key ingredient for Alan's rainbow can be collected, which in turn gives access to Edge's rainbow. Edge's rainbow gives access to the canopy of the Mother Tree, where the final cutscene with the Harvest Goddess can be triggered once the new seedling is fully grown. Before the player can even talk to the sprites, they must first complete a short introductory quest in which they obtain a special quilt. After shipping 500 gold worth of goods, the mayor will appear for a Morning Farm cutscene to talk about the quilt. After shipping another 2,500 gold, for a total of 3,000, he will appear again and give the player one half of the quilt. For the second half, the first house upgrade is required. This costs 3,000 gold, 16 stone, and 18 lumber. Once the upgrade is completed, the player must talk to Gil, the mayor's son, then Dale, the carpenter, then the mayor again for a series of cutscenes, ending with the mayor giving the player a key. This key must be used on the clock tower in the town square to obtain the second half of the quilt. Now at this point, any of the sprite's trees can be approached with the watering can in order to make the sprite appear. Going back to marriage for a second, now that we've discussed the basics of the rainbow quest, you can see what makes certain candidates a little bit more challenging. Any candidate that requires the first rainbow to move in or to complete their 5-heart request requires not just the rainbow, but the entire introductory quilt quest as well. That means finding things to ship for the shipping requirements as well as purchasing the first house upgrade, in addition to the ingredients for the first rainbow. Of course, the process of obtaining the rainbow ingredients makes up the bulk of the routing for rescuing the Harvest Goddess. Many of the ingredients are fairly easy to obtain, as many of them can actually be purchased from one of the flea markets, which take place in the town square on the 22nd of every season, or from the Souffle Farm, so I won't look at all of them in detail. Instead, I'll provide a link to some resources in the description where the complete list can be found, but I will take a closer look at some of the more difficult ingredients for each rainbow. The ingredients for Darren's rainbow are grilled yam, apple, good herb fish, common seashell, and carp. The trickiest ingredient for this one is the good herb fish, which must be cooked in the player's own kitchen with an oven, and the oven must be purchased from the general store for 2,550 gold. The good herb fish is made with an herb and any number of fish, as long as the ingredients are worth a combined total of 300 to 599 gold. Now naturally, the oven is the costliest part of this rainbow and adds yet another expense to marriage runs requiring it. Darren's rainbow gives the player access to West Gull Island, where Colin's tree can be found, and it also unlocks the ability to take Pascal's boat to Toucan Island, which will be necessary for some ingredients later on. The ingredients for Ben's rainbow are grilled eggplant, plain omelet, green herb, good tomato, and char. The grilled eggplant is the hardest of these, although it's really not too bad. First, an eggplant can be purchased from the Souffle Farm and matches from the general store. The matches can be used on a pile of wood on the beach to start a fire, and using the eggplant on the fire will produce a grilled eggplant. The ingredients for Colin's rainbow are blue wonderful, red wool yarn, banana, perfect spinach, and sorry. These ingredients are a bit more difficult. The sorry seems fairly rare and can only be caught in fall or winter in the ocean. But the red wool yarn is by far the costliest. Yarn can be easily purchased from Simon at the spring or summer flea market. In order to dye it red, the player must purchase a yarn maker from the general store for 4,500 gold. The yarn maker automatically comes with the dye pot, which can be used to dye the yarn. But crucially, the animal barn must be built before the general store will even begin selling the yarn maker. The barn costs 3,000 gold, 12 stone, and 12 lumber. The yarn can be dyed with a red herb or one of the various red flowers that the player can grow. The ingredients for Alan's rainbow are green bell, carrot cake, toadstool, ostinaise, and woodfish. The woodfish is the challenge here. To start, it can only be caught in the Goddess Spring on Mount Gelato, which is accessed through Ben's rainbow. It's the only fish in that area, but it is very rare and only appears from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. when the player is using a silver rod. Upgraded tools can be bought from the general store, but they are quite expensive. The alternative is to upgrade the rod at the blacksmith, first to iron, then copper, then silver. To obtain the material necessary for the upgrades, the player must obtain sparkling ore from the mine and give them to Mira, also at the blacksmith's, who will refine them for free. Non-sparkling ore will result in the useless scrap iron, so it's important to take only the sparkling ore. Then, the next big barrier to the woodfish is a wild bear that blocks the player's path to the Goddess Spring. The bear must be befriended before the player can pass. It starts at 99 affection and has to reach 200, and it'll accept gifts if the player approaches while holding something, for a total of plus 15 affection per day. The easiest gift is probably fish, since the player will most likely have caught a lot of them in the process of obtaining the carp, char, and sori. Once the bear is befriended and the rod is upgraded to silver, the woodfish can be caught at the Goddess Spring in any season. Last is Edge's rainbow. Edge's tree can be found on the summit of Mount Gelato, which is accessed through Alan's rainbow. The ingredients for Edge's rainbow are snowflake flour, red honey, lapis lazuli, perfect honeydew, and tuna. The lapis lazuli might seem hard at first, but in fact, one can be found right at the start of the game through the little scavenger hunt minigame in the gift box located on the beach behind the mayor's house. Otherwise, it can only be obtained by refining a sparkling blue wonderful with Mira. The red honey is straightforward, but it can be a bit tedious. First, the player must grow red flowers on the farm, either tulip, hibiscus, cosmos, rose, or anemone, and rather than picking them, keep watering until bees appear hovering over them. The flowers with the bees will produce red honey. The final challenge is another fish, the tuna. It can be caught either in the Waffletown Ocean or on East Gull Island, accessible through Colin's Rainbow, with a copper rod in spring, fall, or winter. Unfortunately, for this one, there's nothing to be done except just to keep casting. The rainbows are quite the gauntlet of moonery, but even once Edge's rainbow is completed, it's not quite over. The player must go to the top of Mount Gelato, where the harvest goddess will explain that a seedling must be found to grow a new mother tree. This requires a fairly simple fetch quest, where Jin and Calvin will provide the player with prospective seedlings, but ultimately both will wilt. The true seedling can then be obtained after another little wild goose chase with Hamilton. The specifics will be in the resources in the description, but once the third seedling is obtained and planted at the Goddess Spring, it will prove to be the true mother tree. Now, the seedling still has to grow, and this depends on the total affection of every villager and animal on the island. But interestingly enough, this total even includes villagers who haven't yet met the player, and even those who haven't even moved in yet. And because most villagers start with a small amount of affection, this adds up quite a lot. The seedling needs a total of 5,000 affection points to finish growing, but it starts with a whopping 3,225. Giving the optimal responses during the opening tutorial section will grant even more, and there are various other boosts that the player will pretty much automatically obtain just from completing other objectives. As for getting the remaining 1,500 or so affection points, there are a few possible strategies. One option is an exploit that's actually possible on any version of the game, including the US version, the Shelly Rucksack Spam. At the tailor, Shelly gets a plus 30 affection boost every time the player requests a rucksack upgrade, even without having the required materials. This can be freely spammed until she reaches the cap of 1,000 affection. It's a bit of a slow spam, but still effective. Another relatively efficient strategy would be to make use of the part-time work mechanic, available at various shops around town. This not only earns a little money, but also gives an affection boost based on how many hours were worked until the shop's closing time, up to plus 10 affection. This boost applies to everyone associated with the shop. So, for example, part-time work at the Souffle Farm would boost Craig, Ruth, and Anissa for a combined possible total of plus 30. Finally, to pad the affection total without a huge time investment, there's always the option of just talking to random villagers as they pass, slowly chipping away with plus 5 conversation boosts here and there. It's not yet clear what the best strategy is, but this will surely be an area for further exploration and optimization. The seedling will undergo 4 growth cutscenes upon sleeping as the affection approaches the 5,000 point threshold. And once it's fully grown, the player can take Edge's Rainbow to the top of the tree, where the 5 sprites will summon the Harvest Goddess, and the credits will roll. That's rescuing the Harvest Goddess in a nutshell. Well, that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover. This video is long enough as it is, so I'm not sure I have time to talk about any of the marriage candidates in detail, but I've already done a bit of routing for Anissa and Phoebe, and I'll share more of my notes with the community throughout the next couple months for anyone who wants to give it a try or collaborate. One more thing I did forget to mention about marriage real quick is just that every candidate has like a little introduction cutscene that has to be triggered before they can be found walking around town, so you have to make sure you account for that. And another quirk about TOT is that forageable gifts like flowers and herbs, they seem kind of sparse. At least that's my impression when I first sat down to play it recently. There are a few pretty good gift options that can be bought for pretty cheap though, like the herbal tea and probably some others, so that's worth looking into as well. Truth be told, TOT is very much uncharted territory in Harvest Moon speedrunning, so I think it's a really cool opportunity for everybody to kind of experiment a little and work together. We also really want to start fleshing out some community resources. We're hoping to put together a little HMSR wiki soon where we can compile everything, but for now, I've linked to a super useful spreadsheet for TOT by Desert. I know this video might have been a little dense. I tried to present it as clearly and succinctly as I could, but if you want to see it all in black and white, Desert's notes are very thorough. You can also find the HMSR Discord server in the description, so you can join if you haven't already. We welcome speedrunning enthusiasts and casual mooners alike. So we'll be doing TOT as game of the season until the end of the year. Hopefully it'll go over well, people will enjoy it, and we can do more of these in the future. But I just wanted to generate some hype for the Harvest stories to come. And the Harvest Moon speedrunning community has some other really cool stuff coming in the near future, so stay tuned. I'll be looking forward to covering that very soon. All that said, happy fall everybody, and happy mooning.